Good day, YouTube friends. Today, it's cleaning out the EGR passages, my 2006 Honda Insight. Those passages get clogged up with soot and oil, harms drivability. Come along, I'll show you what it takes to clean them out. The EGR valve and assembly is underneath this cover. So the first order of business, take this cover and the ducting off so we can get at the EGR valve and the intake runners. These hose pliers are great, even a cheap set. Allows you to gently twist the hose and then pull up on it until it's out of the way. So now I've disconnected this vacuum hose and the PCV hose from those two fittings. And I can now show you the access we have to the intake manifold bolts. There are 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3, and 2 nuts mounted on studs, 1, 2, that have to be removed in order to remove the intake manifold. The EGR plate is right behind that, and that's the part that's going to be clogged. The other part is the EGR valve itself right here. The EGR valve opens, allowing exhaust gas to go in through a passage here that goes into the block and then into that distribution block sandwiched between the intake manifold and the engine itself. That's what becomes clogged with vapors, oil, and such. It's all coked up and blocks off any of the exhaust gases from getting where they're supposed to be. That I'm going to show you, clean it out, and show what it's going to look like. But first, we got to get these nuts off. This intake is filthy. I'm going to try and clean off as much as I can so I don't get any debris into the intake. I have to go get an ear nozzle for doing that one. Once you loosen those two nuts holding the EGR valve on, and you keep your socket from getting stuck on there, it comes off pretty easily. Those are high quality fasteners. Even though they're rusty on this car, the threads are still in pretty good shape. So that nut can be reused again. Once we take this off, we'll see what kind of blockage we might have in that EGR valve before we go taking the gasket off. Well, this looks pretty clean. Not too much soot at all. So that EGR gasket, that EGR plate may not be too crowded, too gummed up after all. But it's a cheap fix, so I'll keep going on with it. The hardest parts are getting at the nuts. The three upper bolts are easy enough to get to. They're right on top. It's the bottom ones that are kind of obstructed as to your access. This one has a tube in the front away. This one you can see down there, this tube blocks access for it most of the way, but you can push it down. The best combination I found for getting in on that left side nut on the stud is a short combination 3/8 half-inch drive flex head socket handle with a short 12 millimeter socket on there. That allows me to get up and under there and still gives me enough torque to loosen that. Once you get it loosened, it unthreads pretty readily. The thread quality is pretty good on these Honda fasteners. Take that out. And that's the nut off that stud. This other one is easier to access. What would be really handy to have is a set of wobble extensions that would allow you to get some of the adapter into the socket. In the absence of that, sometimes a string of shorter adapters will have enough play to give you the angle you need. Oh, now the stud's coming out with it. That could happen. There's so much corrosion at the end of that stud that it acted like it was double nutted. Just took the whole stud out. I'll remove that, screw the stud in before we reinstall everything. Now the 3 upper bolts are just a straight shot. That's loose. That's loose. And that's loose. Once those loosen, they come right out. All right, that's all that is holding that intake manifold to the block and to that spacer plate. So you gently pull this away. This tube up here holds it in place. It's got a spring clamp around it. You just pry it off and give yourself some more wiggle room. And this hose right here little coolant hose. Now we can pull that back and pull this EGR spacer plate out of here and see whether it's crudded up inside or not. Not too bad. You start to see some of the accumulations in there. I'll clean that all up. I'll pull off this old gasket. Put on a new steel shim gasket. When this is all cleaned up, I'll also put new O-ring gaskets around each of the runners. So I have a nice clean surface. First, let me clean up inside there. The way I'm going to do that is with a screwdriver. Get the majority of the debris out of there, and then use some throttle body cleaner that dissolves deposits like this, so that there's no obstructions. Another thing I'd like to point out is the passage that the exhaust gas travels through. It goes in this port here through the EGR valve, into the block, and then out, down into this oval-shaped opening. From there, it then gets distributed to each of the passages, to each of the individual cylinders. This passage here, down to there, can get clogged up. So I'll spray some carburetor cleaner down there, or fuel system cleaner, and scrape out what I can to prevent that oil from building up in there and coking up. You use whatever tools and picks you need in order to get in there and scrape out as much of that debris as you can. The more you're able to loosen up before you spray any solvent in there, the more effective that solvent is going to be. I feel like a dental hygienist cleaning this thing out. You can see how clean just a little brake cleaner has gotten it. What I'm going to do now is flush out that part with some carb and throttle body cleaner. Squirt that right down that passage. See what comes out the other end. And just for clarity's sake, it's this outer port. I don't know if you could see that there. Let's put this there. It's this outer port that you squirt fluid down into. That's the one that leads to that oval-shaped port. Let's bring you around to show you the procedure up close. Right over here, on the left side of this rectangular opening in the EGR base, there's a port that leads through the block to that oval-shaped port. This particular carburetor cleaner needs to be basically vertical in order for it to squirt, so I've got to move the intake hose out of the way. Let that soak in a bit, and then use a shop towel to clean out the gum that it's loosened up in there. But that's the port. You can see all the black gum that this carburetor cleaner has loosened up. Let's do it again. This is not a very badly clogged port. I've seen pictures of people where it's completely obstructed by the burnt on oil that collects. Just do what you can to get all that gum out from that port. Give your engine a fresh start. This engine has 150,000 miles. I'm quite sure this process has never been done on it before. So I guess that's every 150,000 miles. At least I know I need to do this procedure. So in the year 2036 or so, I guess it'll be time to do this again. All right, there's a little bit of buildup there that's not bad. And you just repeat the process until nothing more comes out of there. However long that is, whatever tools it takes and that you have at your disposal. And also squirt some compressed air through there. Just a combination of that. Cleaner, wiping it out, squirting it out, blowing it out, whatever it takes. Let's get a new towel under there. Let's begin cleaning up that gasket surface. The way I'd like to do that is to plug those intake ports. With nice clean shop towels. If that shop towel gets a little saturated with brake cleaner or carburetor cleaner, not a problem. That'll help clean off the inside of that intake port. So make sure you can get that back out. Get yourself a little bit of Scotch-Brite and gently just rub the surface down. Probably don't even need to go to Scotch-Brite. You just use a paper towel or shop towel, some solvent. All right, that's about as clean as I'm going to get it. I'm going to go inside, clean up that spacer plate with some soap and water. Okay, now that I've cleaned out those passages of all the gunked up oil, I'm going to install a new gasket. Some people claim you don't need one. They're not expensive. They're like $30 from the Honda dealer. I'm going to slide the gasket and the spacer plate over the two studs. And then I'm going to replace the O-rings that seal each runner. It's part number 17106PHM-006. You need 3 of them, 1 for each runner. They're sold individually, not as a kit. This is what they look like. And they have a little tang locating where they should be. That tang faces downward. Just pull out the old one. Press in the new one, starting where that tang goes through a little slot in the intake. I'll show you a little close-up of those gaskets. Here's the new intake gasket, the O-ring. You have a little tang down at the bottom. You can see, if you compare, how it sits out slightly further than the old one. The old one's been compressed for 14 years and 150,000 miles, so they're inexpensive. Even through the dealer, they're like $6 a piece. Just pull them out one at a time, put in the new ones. Sorry, it's hard to get a camera angle where you can see, but it's pretty simple. You just push the O-ring into that slot in the intake. Then you reposition it over that intake manifold, the spacer plate, gently slide it into place. Definitely start these by hand. They thread in easily. Don't tighten anything down just yet. You want all the bolts and nuts in place so you can tighten them down evenly, because you're going to compress those new O-rings for the intake. Get the nuts started. I'm pushing it up from underneath, getting it started on the stud. There we go. And again, whatever combination of adapters and wrenches and sockets work for your particular setup, that's what you use. Okay, I'm just tightening it now until it seats. I'll come back after I've done the top ones. And torque them down. Right now, I'm just taking up the clearance between the intake manifold and the gasket. And I'm sure there's a torque spec, but all you can do is tighten it till it's snug. Now I can reconnect this coolant pipe. Reconnect this vacuum line. Reconnect this EGR. Reconnect this PCV valve. Snap those into their locating brackets. Now, time for reinstalling that EGR valve. Clean off its mating surface. I already scraped it off with a razor blade. Just clean off any leftover debris. And this takes an inexpensive EGR valve gasket. It's a composite, high-temp material. Put it on there. And that goes on with the port with the plug facing forward. Can't really go on any other way. I'm just putting some anti-seize on the nuts. So that those don't freeze to those studs sticking up. Cinch those down. And it's done. Plug that EGR valve back in. Plug in any connectors you took apart for clearance. I disconnected this connector there. That connector's on. I disconnected this pipe over here. Goes back into place. That just slides on. This sensor clips into place. What have I got? Everything in place? I believe it is. Let's get these old O-rings out of here. Let's reinstall this intake tube. Then it's just a cover. So that's one bolt with an acorn head and 2 acorn nuts to secure that cover. And that's it, job's done. Time to start her up and see how she runs. Well, that's it, folks. That's all the job takes. 5 gaskets, about an hour's worth of time, some cleaning solvent, some rags. And you too can clean out your EGR passages and have a smooth running Honda Insight. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful. Bye now.